November 14th, 1943, 0530 hours, Bougainville Island, Solomon Islands. Captain Hiroshi Tanaka crouched in a banyan tree 30 feet above the jungle floor, his Arisaka Type 97 sniper rifle cradled in his arms, watching American Marines dig foxholes through his scope. He spotted one leaning against a supply crate, cleaning what looked like a hunting rifle with a cheap commercial scope bolted on top. Tanaka smirked and muttered to his spotter, "Look at that one, the cowboy with the catalog rifle. Probably ordered it from a department store for shooting deer on his farm. They send farmers with mail-order toys to fight the Emperor's marksmen. This will be easier than I thought." He settled his cheek against the stock, exhaled slowly, and prepared to teach the Americans what real sniping looked like. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed. Every week we uncover the stories the world forgot. What Captain Tanaka didn't know, as he centered his crosshairs on that Marine's helmet and prepared to squeeze the trigger, was that the cowboy with the catalog rifle was Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Bellamy, a former Montana ranch hand who'd grown up shooting coyotes at 600 yards and who'd spent the last 6 months turning that mail-order Springfield into the most feared weapon in the 3rd Marine Division. And by sunset, Tanaka and 19 of his fellow snipers would be dead, killed by a man they dismissed as a yokel with a department store gun, proving once again that American ingenuity, marksmanship, and industrial accessibility could turn even a catalog rifle into an instrument of surgical lethality. The rifle that Japanese snipers mocked was the Springfield M1903A4, and on paper it looked like exactly what Tanaka thought it was. A World War I bolt-action design retrofitted with a commercial Weaver 330C scope, a 2.5x magnification optic that cost $15.95 in the 1941 Sears catalog and looked like something you'd mount on a .22 for plinking tin cans. But the numbers told a different story. The Springfield fired the .30-06 cartridge, a 150-grain bullet leaving the muzzle at 2,800 feet per second with 2,820 foot-pounds of energy. Enough to punch through a steel helmet at 800 yards or kill a man at 1,200 if the shooter knew his holdovers. The rifle weighed 9.5 pounds loaded with a 5-round internal magazine and a smooth bolt throw that let a practiced shooter fire 10 aimed rounds per minute. The Weaver scope, cheap as it was, held 0 in jungle humidity and had clear glass that gathered enough light for dawn and dusk shooting. And the convergence effect, that sweet spot where bullet trajectory intersected sight picture, was 300 yards. Exactly the range where Japanese snipers like to work, close enough to see their target suffer, far enough to feel safe. The M1903A4 turned that comfort zone into a killing field. The training that produced Sergeant Bellamy and his fellow Marine snipers was brutal, methodical, and soaked in blood from early mistakes. In the Guadalcanal campaign, American forces lost hundreds of men to Japanese snipers who operated with near impunity, hidden in trees and spider holes, picking off officers and radio men with precision that bordered on surgical. The Marines responded by establishing sniper schools at Camp Pendleton and Camp Lejeune, pulling shooters from rural backgrounds, farm boys, hunters, trappers, men who understood wind, range estimation, and patience. The doctrine that emerged was pure American pragmatism, overwhelming volume of precision fire. Japanese snipers were trained to fire one perfect shot and then relocate. American snipers were trained to fire 10 good shots in rapid succession and turn entire grid squares into no man's land. Gunnery Sergeant Dan Cass, chief instructor at Pendleton, told his students, "The Japs think sniping is an art. They're wrong. It's a trade. You learn your fundamentals. You practice until your hands bleed, and then you go kill every enemy rifleman stupid enough to think one shot makes him invisible. Speed and accuracy beat patience every time." The first vignette that proved the M1903A4's lethality came on October 7, 1943, during the initial Bougainville landings. Sergeant Bellamy and his spotter, Corporal Eddie Reeves, were positioned on a ridgeline overlooking the Cormaquina River when a Japanese sniper opened fire on a Marine machine gun crew 400 yards downslope. The first shot killed the gunner. The second wounded the assistant gunner. Bellamy tracked the muzzle flash to a palm tree cluster. ranged it at 380 yards, adjusted for a 10-knot crosswind, and fired. The Springfield's report cracked across the valley, and through his scope Bellamy watched a body tumble 40 feet to the ground. He worked a bolt, chambered another round, and scanned for movement. 2 more muzzle flashes, more snipers, bracketing the machine gun position. Bellamy fired twice in 4 seconds. 2 more Japanese snipers dead before they could relocate. Reeves, watching through binoculars, whispered, 3 shots, 3 kills. The Japs are going to start respecting that mail-order rifle. Bellamy said nothing, just reloaded and kept scanning. The machine gun crew, pinned down and bleeding 30 seconds earlier, was back in action, pouring fire into Japanese positions. One American sniper with a cheap scope had saved a crew, shifted a firefight, and started building a legend. The second vignette was the one that turned Sergeant Bellamy into a ghost story the Japanese told themselves to explain the inexplicable. On November 14th, the day Captain Tanaka died, the 3rd Marines were advancing through dense jungle toward the Piva airstrip when Japanese snipers turned a 200-yard stretch of trail into a charnel house. 4 Marines down in 10 minutes, all headshots, all from concealed positions. The advance stalled. Bellamy moved forward with Reeves, low-crawling through Kenai grass, and set up on a slight rise that gave him sightlines into the canopy. He spent 20 minutes glassing the trees, looking for the telltale signs, unnatural shadows, rope lines, disturbed foliage. He found the first sniper at 340 yards, visible only as a dark shape against bark. Bellamy fired, the Springfield barking once, and the shape fell. He shifted, found the second sniper adjusting position in a neighboring tree, fired again. Then the third, the fourth, working the bolt like a sewing machine, brass ejecting in bright arcs, each shot a death sentence. The Japanese, realizing they were being hunted by something they couldn't locate, began firing wildly into the jungle, wasting ammunition on shadows. Bellamy killed 6 more in the next hour, methodically, coldly, never moving from his position because he didn't need to. By noon, the trail was clear. By sunset, he'd killed 20 confirmed, each logged by Reeves with range, conditions, and time. A captured Japanese soldier, interrogated 2 days later, told his Marine questioners through a translator, "We thought the sniper was a myth, a ghost. 1 rifle, 20 of our best marksmen dead. We stopped using the trees. We started digging deeper. The man with the catalog rifle made us afraid of the sky." The upgrade that transformed the M1903A4 from effective to dominant came in early 1944 with the introduction of the M72 match-grade ammunition and the Unertolate-X scope for designated long-range shooters. The M72 round used carefully selected powder charges and precision machine bullets that tightened groupings from 3 inches at 100 yards to under 1 inch. Sniper-grade accuracy that let Marines engage targets out to 1,000 yards with confidence. The Unertl scope, an 8x magnification optic with target knobs for precise windage and elevation adjustments, turned the Springfield into a true long-range instrument. But it was heavier, more fragile, and required careful handling. So most snipers stuck with the cheaper Weaver for jungle work where speed and durability mattered more than magnification. The sound of the M1903A4 became iconic in the Pacific. The sharp crack of the .30-06 echoing through jungles and across coral atolls, followed by silence, then the distant thump of a body hitting the ground. Marines called it the quiet thunder. Quiet because you heard it after the enemy was already dead. Thunder because it announced that American shooters owned the battle space. The battlefield effect was immediate and psychological. Japanese infantry, already demoralized by artillery and airstrikes, now faced an enemy who could kill their leaders, their machine gunners, and their snipers from distances they couldn't match with their Arisaka rifles and 2.5x scopes. The range and role shift for Marine snipers came from logistics and tactical integration that the Japanese couldn't replicate. American snipers operated in 2-man teams with spotters carrying M1 Garins for security, supported by rifle squads that provided overwatch and suppression. They had access to detailed maps, aerial reconnaissance photos, and radio communications that let them call in artillery or air support if they encountered hardened positions. Resupply was constant: ammunition, optics, cleaning supplies, even replacement rifles if one was damaged. A Marine sniper who broke his scope in combat could have a new one delivered within 48 hours, flown in from rear depots that stocked thousands of spare parts. The role expanded rapidly. Initially tasked with counter-sniper work, Marine snipers became forward observers, calling fire missions on Japanese artillery. They became harassment specialists, making nighttime movement impossible for enemy supply parties. They became psychological warfare assets, their presence alone forcing Japanese troops to stay in bunkers during daylight. The Springfield, that mail-order rifle, became a multi-role platform because the system supporting it was flexible, adaptive, and inexhaustible. Enemy respect for American snipers evolved from contempt to dread over the course of 1943 and 1944. A diary recovered from a dead Japanese lieutenant on Saipan in June 1944 contained this entry: "The American snipers are not like ours. They do not hide and wait for the perfect shot. They hunt. They move constantly, kill relentlessly, and vanish before we can respond. Our snipers are artists who take pride in single perfect kills. The Americans are butchers who take pride in volume. I do not know which is more effective, but I know which is more terrifying." That assessment, clinical and bitter, appeared in dozens of captured documents. Post-war interrogations of Japanese officers revealed a grudging respect for American marksmanship training. They'd assumed American conscripts would be poor shooters, but discovered instead that farm boys who'd grown up hunting for survival were natural snipers who adapted to military training with terrifying speed. Colonel Takeshi Yamamoto, former commander of Japanese sniper training programs, wrote in his 1949 memoir, "We trained our snipers for 6 months in the art of concealment, patience, and perfect shooting. The Americans trained theirs for 6 weeks in fundamentals and sent them to war with good enough rifles. And they won. I realize now that we confuse precision with effectiveness. 1 perfect shot that kills 1 man is art. 10 good shots that kill 8 men is war." The industrial avalanche that buried Japanese hopes of counter-sniper parity was pure American manufacturing might. By mid-1944, Remington Arms was producing 2,000 M1903A4 rifles per month at its Alien, New York plant, using assembly line techniques that kept costs low and quality high. Each rifle required 68 precision machine parts, 14 hours of skilled labor, and testing that included firing 50 rounds to verify accuracy before acceptance. Weaver scope production hit 5,000 units per month by late 1944, with Lyman and Unertl adding hundreds more high-end optics for specialist shooters. The Marines trained 3,200 designated snipers between 1943 and 1945, each receiving 400 rounds of practice ammunition before deployment, more ammunition than an entire Japanese sniper platoon might fire in 6 months of combat. The comparison was devastating. If an American sniper was killed, his rifle was cleaned, re-zeroed, and issued to a replacement within a week. If a Japanese sniper was killed, his custom-fitted rifle and hand-selected scope often died with him, irreplaceable because Japanese optics factories were being bombed and skilled workers conscripted into infantry units. The Americans could afford to be profligate because they had the industrial base to waste. The Japanese had to be perfect because they had nothing to spare. Perfection lost. The final boss for American snipers armed with Springfield M1903A4S wasn't enemy snipers. It was the Japanese Special Naval Landing Force Scout Snipers, elite troops trained at the Yokosuka Naval Base who operated with Arisaka Type 97s, fitted with 4X scopes, and who'd spent years perfecting their craft in China and Manchuria. These weren't conscripts with basic marksmanship training. They were professionals who understood ballistics, camouflage, and fieldcraft at levels that matched or exceeded their American counterparts. They were also, by late 1944, increasingly desperate and increasingly vulnerable. The vulnerability came from their doctrine. Japanese scout snipers were trained to operate alone or in pairs, deep behind enemy lines, living off the land and taking high-value targets, officers, artillery spotters, radio operators. They were ghosts, invisible and patient. But ghosts need logistics too. and by 1944 American air superiority and submarine warfare had choked Japanese supply lines so completely that these elite snipers were operating with degraded equipment, dwindling ammunition, and no resupply. Their scopes fogged in humidity. Their rifles rusted. Their ammunition, stored in jungle caches for months, developed moisture damage that affected accuracy. Meanwhile, American snipers had clean rifles, fresh ammunition, and replacement optics arriving by cargo plane every week. The confrontation that proved the industrial advantage over individual skill came on Polilliu in September 1944, during the brutal fight for the Umurbergal Ridges, a coral nightmare the Marines called Bloody Nose Ridge. Japanese scout snipers had fortified the heights, turning every cave and crevice into a sniper hide. They killed 37 Marines in the first 2 days, most with single shots from ranges exceeding 600 yards, professional work, coldly executed. The Marines responded by sending in their own sniper teams, including Sergeant Bellamy and a young corporal named Jake Morrison, a Tennessee boy who'd won state shooting championships before the war. The battle that followed was a brutal chess match. Japanese snipers fired from caves with perfect concealment but limited fields of fire. American snipers operated from lower ground with worse cover but superior optics, ammunition, and most importantly, artillery support. When Bellamy spotted a muzzle flash from a cave at 720 yards, extreme range for the Springfield, he didn't take a risky shot. He radioed coordinates to the Battalion Fire Direction Center, and 4 minutes later a 105 mm howitzer battery dropped 20 rounds of high explosive on the ridge face, collapsing the cave and everyone in it. Morrison, watching through his scope, said quietly, "That's how you counter-snipe when you've got the whole American war machine behind you." Bellamy replied, "Fair fights are for suckers. We're here to win." Over the next week, American snipers on Polilliu killed or suppressed every Japanese sniper on Bloody Nose Ridge using a combination of direct fire and indirect fire support. When they couldn't get a clean shot, they called artillery. When artillery couldn't reach, they called in Corsairs with napalm. The Japanese snipers, trained for individual combat, had no answer to combined arms integration. A captured Japanese sergeant, bleeding from shrapnel wounds and pulled from a collapsed bunker, told his interrogators through a translator, "Your snipers are not better shooters than ours, but they have radios, and radios call artillery, and artillery does not miss. We are hunters with rifles. You are hunters with an army." That assessment appeared in Marine Corps intelligence summaries and became a teaching point at sniper schools. Individual skill matters, but operational integration wins firefights. The operation that proved inevitability came during the Okinawa campaign in April 1945, specifically during the fight for Kakaza Ridge. The Japanese 62nd Division had positioned sniper teams throughout the ridge complex, creating interlocking fields of fire that turned approaches into killing zones. The Marines responded with Operation Broomstick, a systematic counter-sniper campaign that deployed 30 sniper teams across a 2-mile front with orders to suppress, kill, or drive underground every Japanese shooter. The teams worked in coordination, using radio communications to share target locations, coordinate fires, and call in supporting arms. Over 4 days, Marine snipers logged 347 confirmed kills, most at ranges between 300 and 600 yards, using tactics that emphasized volume over artistry. Sergeant Bellamy alone accounted for 43 kills during Broomstick, firing over 200 rounds and wearing out a barrel that had to be replaced mid-operation, a replacement that arrived via supply drop within 6 hours. A Japanese captain, captured when his position was overrun, was shown the after-action reports and asked for his assessment. He stared at the numbers, 347 kills in 4 days, and said through his translator, "Impossible. You cannot kill that many trained men that quickly. This is American propaganda." The interrogator showed him aerial photographs of the ridge marked with red circles indicating confirmed sniper kills, each verified by 2-man observation teams. The captain's face went gray. He said quietly, "We trained our snipers for years. You replace yours in weeks. We give our best men rifles. You give rifles to farmers and make them better than our best men. How do we fight this?" The interrogator, a major from Iowa who'd taught high school before the war, replied simply, "You don't. That's the point." The scoreboard crescendo for the Springfield M1903A4 in the Pacific War read, like an industrial production report, crossed with a butcher's tally. Marine snipers armed with the Springfield logged over 9,000 confirmed kills between 1943 and 1945, with confirmed meaning a spotter verified the target or enemy bodies were later counted. The actual number was likely double that. Many kills were unobserved, many bodies were never found in jungles and caves, and many Japanese soldiers simply stopped appearing after a sniper team worked an area. The Marines fielded approximately 1,200 trained snipers during the Pacific Campaign, meaning each sniper averaged 7.5 confirmed kills, a ratio that seems modest until you consider these were precision eliminations of high-value targets. Enemy snipers, officers, machine gunners, forward observers, not random infantry. The sortie counts were equally stark. Marine sniper teams conducted over 12,000 individual missions, with each mission defined as a two-man team deploying forward of friendly lines for sniper operations. The kill per mission rate was 0.75, meaning 3 out of 4 times a sniper team went hunting, someone died. The ammunition expenditure told its own story about American industrial capacity versus Japanese scarcity. Marine snipers in the Pacific fired approximately 180,000 rounds of match-grade .30-06 ammunition during the war, averaging 20 rounds per confirmed kill, a ratio that horrified Japanese officers who'd been trained to make every shot count because resupply was uncertain. 20 rounds per kill seemed wasteful until you factored in ranging shots, environmental familiarization, suppression fire, and the reality that snipers weren't just killing. They were controlling terrain, denying movement, and breaking enemy morale. The United States produced over 4 billion rounds of .30-06 ammunition during World War II. The Marines could afford to let snipers shoot liberally because the industrial base behind them was effectively infinite. Meanwhile, Japanese snipers were operating with maybe 200 rounds total per deployment, hoarding ammunition like water in a desert, taking only perfect shots because they might not get resupply for months. The mathematical reality was crushing. American snipers could afford to miss. Japanese snipers couldn't afford to be seen. The rifle production numbers drove the point home with sledgehammer subtlety. Remington manufactured over 28,000 M1903A4 sniper rifles between 1943 and 1945. Smith Corona produced another 2,000. Springfield Armory contributed thousands more standard M1903s that were later converted to sniper configuration. Total American sniper rifle production, over 30,000 units in 3 years. In contrast, Japanese factories produced approximately 1,200 Type 97 sniper rifles during the entire war, with production hampered by material shortages, bombing raids, and the fact that skilled workers were being drafted into combat units. The Americans built 25 sniper rifles for every one the Japanese produced. Even more devastating, American optics production exceeded 50,000 units during the war. Weaver, Lyman, Unertl, and others, meaning there were more scopes than rifles, ensuring every damaged optic could be replaced immediately. Japanese optics production was maybe 2,000 units total, and quality control was so poor that many scopes arrived at frontline units already damaged or misaligned. An American sniper who broke a scope could have a replacement in 48 hours. A Japanese sniper who broke his scope was done, finished, reduced to using iron sights against enemies with magnified optics. The training pipeline comparison was equally brutal. The Marine Corps trained snipers in 6-week courses at 3 locations: Camp Pendleton, Camp Lejeune, and later at forward bases in Hawaii. Each course graduated 40 to 60 students, ran continuously, and had a 70% pass rate. Washouts were recycled into regular infantry. The training included 400 rounds of live fire per student, classroom instruction on ballistics and wind reading, fieldcraft exercises, and culminated in practical exercises where students had to achieve 90% hit rates at known distances. By 1945, the Marines were graduating 200 new snipers every month, replacing combat losses and expanding the force structure. The Japanese trained snipers at Yokosuka Naval Base and a handful of army facilities in Japan and Manchuria. Courses ran 6 months, emphasized perfection over volume, and graduated maybe 20 students per cycle. By 1944, with Japan under constant bombing and shipping interdicted, sniper training had essentially stopped. Experienced snipers killed in combat were not replaced. Units that lost their designated snipers simply went without. The Americans treated snipers as a renewable resource, mass-produced through standardized training. The Japanese treated snipers as irreplaceable specialists, artists who couldn't be rushed. The American system won because war rewards volume, not artistry. The technological edge American snipers enjoyed wasn't just rifles and scopes. It was everything around them. Marine sniper teams carried waterproof map cases, field telephones or SCR, 300 radios, compasses, rangefinders, binoculars, first aid kits, and enough ammunition to sustain a firefight if compromised. They had access to aerial photographs updated weekly, intelligence reports on enemy positions, and weather forecasts that helped them predict wind and temperature effects on bullet trajectory. They operated with fire support coordinators who could drop artillery or naval gunfire on targets beyond rifle range. They had medics, supply lines, and guaranteed evacuation if wounded. Japanese snipers operated alone or in pairs with maybe 100 rounds, no radio, sketchy maps, and the knowledge that if wounded, they'd likely die where they fell because Japanese logistics couldn't support medical evacuation from forward positions. The technology gap wasn't measured in rifle performance. It was measured in the entire ecosystem supporting the rifleman. And that ecosystem was so lopsidedly American that the fight was over before it started. The final image, the museum epilogue that closes this story, sits in the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia, in a climate-controlled case on the second floor. A Springfield M1903A4 leans against a backdrop of jungle camouflage netting. The rifle is worn, the stock dinged and scarred, the weaver scope scratched but intact. The placard identifies it as the rifle carried by Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Bellamy through Bougainville, Peleliu, and Okinawa, credited with 187 confirmed kills, though Bellamy himself always said the number was lower and the confirmations were generous. Beside the rifle sits a small leather journal, open to a page dated November 14, 1943. The entry, written in Bellamy's careful handwriting, reads, "Killed 20 today. Japs at good positions, but bad logistics. They're brave, well-trained, and doomed. Not because we're better shots. Some of them are better than me. But because when I run out of ammunition, I get more. When they run out, they die." That's the whole war in one sentence. Tucked behind the journal, barely visible unless you lean close to the glass, is a fragment of paper recovered from a Japanese position on Okinawa. It's a page from a diary, translated and mounted by museum staff. The handwriting is elegant, the Japanese characters carefully formed, the prose that of an educated man. It reads, April 18th, 1945. The Americans have a saying, "Quantity has a quality all its own." I understand now. Their snipers are not better than ours individually, but there are 10 of them for every one of us, and they all have good rifles, endless ammunition, and the certainty of resupply. We mocked their mail-order rifles and farm boy shooters. They killed us with those rifles and those farm boys. The mockery dies with us. The lesson remains. Do not fight a nation that can afford to arm every farm boy with a quality rifle and teach him to use it. You will lose not because they are better, but because they are everywhere, always, forever. The final line, printed in English on the museum placard, comes from a 1947 Marine Corps after-action analysis. The Springfield M1903A4 was not the best sniper rifle of World War II, but it was good enough, available in quantity, and backed by a training and logistics system that made every shooter effective. In war, good enough, delivered by the thousands defeats, perfect, delivered in dozens. The Pacific proved it. The Japanese died proving it. If you love untold stories from history's darkest hours, subscribe and join us on the next mission through time.